Hi there, friends. Welcome to the No Small Stories podcast, where we explore paths less traveled with creatives and entrepreneurs from all walks of life and in all stages of their journey. No matter how small you start, your story is always a big deal to us. So let's dive into today's episode and meet our guest. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of the No Small Stories podcast. Johnny is here to co-host with me today. I am your host, Haleigh Overseth, and we are joined today by the Phantom Detectives. We've got Joshua, Rick, and Melissa. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us on board.
So excited to talk to you guys. So, Joshua, I'm going to start off with you. Tell us a little bit about Phantom Detectives, because I know you're director and founder. And then I do want to talk, Melissa and Rick, I want you guys to talk about your roles as well. But tell the audience about Phantom Detectives.
Sure. I'm going to just go into my backstory and then kind of tie it into Phantom Detectives. So I originally got my start in the supernatural watching unsolved mysteries with the late, great Robert Stack, much like any kid that was growing up in the 1980s. And, of course, In Search of by Leonard Nimoy, which was pretty much the first true, paranormal show with Spock from Star Trek. Mm-hmm. And one of the really early episodes that really interested me was called the General Wayne Inn in Marion Station, Pennsylvania. It's called the Inn of the 17 Ghosts. Many dignitaries have, once visited there, including Marquis de Lafayette, Edgar Allan Poe, George Washington, Ben Franklin. It was kind of one of the big stops, basically. So what happened was in 1792, they renamed it to the General Wayne Inn after Revolutionary War hero, my ancestor, Major General Anthony Wayne.
Very interesting. So yes, got some family relation there. That's kind of cool.
Yes. Absolutely. And what's cool about it is it's this old inn. I suppose on the Unsolved Mysteries episode, they mentioned how patrons would be sitting at the bar and a lot of the women would basically report like a spirit that would be blowing on their necks. There would also be like the patrons in the bar would be watching the television and it would be turning clockwise, counterclockwise. And also there would be reports of seeing Hessian soldiers throughout the inn. So it was really that episode that really brought me into the paranormal. And then in the 1990s, I started reading every book by Dr. Hans Holzer, who was pretty much America's first ghost hunter. Like, some of his legendary cases with his trans medium Sybil Leek and Ethel Myers. And then, of course, reading books on UFOs. I used to listen to Art Bell back in the 90s. It was just amazing. I grew up as a lifelong listener. And then years later, I would end up working with his staff members. And then, of course, 2002, I actually had the opportunity to investigate the General Wayne Inn with my late mentor, Michael Ling Mayer. And so I actually went to the basement area and, took 3 consecutive photos. Back then, ghost hunting equipment wasn't like it was now. It was, you might have had an EMF meter, a voice recorder, and maybe dowsing rods at the most. But now you have all kinds of apparatuses. But back then it was real basic. So in the basement area, I picked up some really weird green and yellow streaks of light. And there I had no reasonable explanation. I took it to multiple film companies and then boom, there was just no reason for those to be there. And then in 2004, Ghost Hunters started coming out on television, Paranormal State with Ryan Buell, and of course, a Ghost Adventure. So all those shows, I really loved how they would go in and collect data, set up, interview the eyewitnesses that were working the cases. Also, conducting the investigation, breaking down the equipment, and revealing the evidence. It was really fascinating for me. So I decided 2014, I wanted to get my start in something. So I created the Summer Wind Restoration Society. We'll have to do another show on that, but I'll just give you a brief rundown.
I was going to say, I was reading a bit about that on the website, and that looked interesting. I lived in Wisconsin for a couple of years, so I was like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, we actually own the original engineering diagrams to Summerwind, which were quite hard to find. And our idea is to eventually rebuild this old ruined mansion on the shores of West Bay Lake, Wisconsin. And I worked with Wisconsin paranormal investigator Craig Naring. And Craig, of course, spearheads the project now. I passed on that to him. But so when I wanted to form Phantom Detectives, I wanted to really revolutionize paranormal investigating in Philadelphia. So my idea was I decided I wasn't happy with how my old team was progressing. So I started a new team and I brought one of my original team members who have since left the team. She started focusing on her career. So my idea was I started reading this old 1950s comic book called The Phantom Detective. It was a very popular comic book in the 50s. And there's also called a video game called Ghost Trick Phantom Detectives by Capcom. So I said, this name just immediately drew me. And of course, watching Phantom of the Opera and Sherlock Holmes back to back. So detecting the paranormal kind of became our symbol. So in August of 2020, I started creating business cards. I started doing, building the social media pages, building the team email, had the website constructed from the ground up. And then pretty much just started, doing investigations on a new banner. What I did was before I started founding the team, I trained with Brian J. Cano at the Selma Mansion in October 2020. Brian, of course, was the tech manager on the Haunted Collector with John Zaffis. Really great teacher.
Mm-hmm.
He showed me how to set up EVPs, how to do, run the EMF meters, how to do the dowsing rods, how to use the SLS camera. Just a quick, just a tutorial the whole night on a public investigation. And then what I did is I took that knowledge and we did our first investigation in December 2020 at the Sanderson Museum. And there, like, we were up in the violin room, which was one of the most active parts of the mansion, the museum. And actually, what's really cool about the museum is Abraham Lincoln. There's actually a bandage that was on President Abraham Lincoln in the museum, as well as a purse from the Jenny Wade house. So basically, what we did was we set up equipment, and in the violin room, you can see that we went ahead and, one of our team members took a really huge colored orb that had like a face very defined in this violin room. And at the same time, our battery equipment meters were drained. At the same time, the security cameras were going off. So there was something there. So what we did was then we rolled into investigation 2 with the Mill of Aunt Selma. This was before Rick and Melissa joined. So my team member and I set up equipment in all parts of this old mill. It's the oldest continuing operating mill in the United States. And there we put a security camera picture right on the door. And mind you, this door was completely latched shut and bolted shut. It flew open by itself. No wind, there was no rain. No one was on the property that night. It wasn't snowy. So I have no reasonable explanation why that happened. So what I did is in March of 2021, I started, looking for more members because I wanted to add to the Phantom Detectives talent pool. So I had found that Mr. Rick Warner was a LinkedIn friend, and I found out he was living in the area. So I said, he's from the MUFON world. He has skills in interviewing eyewitnesses. He's been certified in fetal and crash and retrievals through MUFON University. And, he has a lot of knowledge on how to draw out client stories. So I invited him along to bring his skills into the team in March of 2021. And we tried him out at the Betsy Roth's house, our first investigation, and he absolutely loved working with us and has been with us since. And Mr. Warner, would you care to take over from here?
Yeah, let's hear from Rick.
Yeah, so, okay, well, let me start out and introduce myself. Okay, so I'm the lead investigator for Phantom Detectives, and as mentioned, we're a group of paranormal investigators. I'm also the tech manager and the director of client relations. And I also have another organization that I'm actually the co-founder of, and I'm the executive director for ERC, which stands for Extraterrestrial Research Center. I'm a director of investigations, and I'm also the USA ambassador to the Italian UFO Federation. But anyway, so Joshua mentioned the Betsy Ross house. So I remember reading somewhere about that place, about some lady and her daughter was down in the basement and, just felt like there was like an evil presence or something down there. And so me and this girl that's, who's no longer part of the Phantom Detectives team, we were doing an EVP session, and we had our digital recorders on and all that. And so I think Joshua was upstairs somewhere. And later on, when I was doing playback, I'm hearing like these growls, like, and at first I thought, and I knew it couldn't be a wind because it wasn't like the kind of sound like when the wind's blowing through something. That it wasn't even like that at all. It's just like a really deep kind of an evil growl.
Yeah, you guys have some interesting EVP clips that you have on the website.
Yeah, and then in different parts of the video or the audio in the timeline, so I marked down time-stamped, wrote it down on paper, what was coming in at certain times, and it would stop for a while and then it would come back. So, but everybody heard it, says, yeah, it definitely sounds like um, something very evil that's down there. I mean, it sounded like almost like demonic, or because it was just just a
Hmm.
real deep kind of growl and stuff like that. But yeah,
So
I mean, we've captured a lot of interesting evidence of places that we've been to on all our investigations, and we go in and we look for the facts, and rather than just throw in at everything like, yeah, that's paranormal and all that, we
hmm
try to debunk things first, to make
find
sure,
a
like, well,
reasonable explanation first, right?
yeah, exactly. Like,
Hmm.
well, the lights are flickering, that doesn't necessarily mean it's something paranormal, but sometimes it could be an electrical issue or something like that. Or you can hear, tapping on the wall or something like that. Maybe something to do with the plumbing,
Hmm.
or um, change in temperature in the house. There could be, other explanations. There could be something in the wall that's crawling around that's making noise. You think it's something paranormal. So you have to look at all the facts. You got to gather the evidence to arrive to an intelligent conclusion about an investigation. So, and before we start an investigation, so I do all the client interviews, and I go through, I have a list of questions that I ask them, and I want to find out about the property. Is this a commercial building? Some kind of business, a restaurant, hospital, what have you? Is it a house? How many levels are to the house? How many bedrooms? Um, and then go through and find out what are they picking up? Electrical disturbances, walking noises, certain sounds. Has anybody touched you? Or and then I go into, like, you know, how many are people, is this a place that people live? Do they live here? Or is it like a bed and breakfast inn where they don't really live there, but they have visitors that come in that have reported things? So try to find out a little bit of, a lot about the history, when the property was built, who's lived there, any possible sighting reports from previous owners, or any guests that have come into the place.
See if you can find a pattern of high strangeness or unusual activity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So, you just try to, ask them questions. And you also, too, the other reason why you're asking the questions is because you're trying to establish credibility. So
Hmm.
let's say, like, for an example, they're saying, like, well, I've been hearing these strange sounds and things like that. And then they tell you, well, they've been having trouble with their eyes. And maybe they're saying that they're seeing things, certain, like, weird shadows or spots, but yet they have really bad eyes, or they have to get eye surgery, or, whatever it is. So
Hmm.
things like that, you're having trouble with your vision, that could cause you to think you're seeing something that isn't there.
Hmm.
Um,
So what
also
about
too,
the equipment? Because I know that, like, and Joshua
yeah.
talked a little bit about it, but so is that mostly what you handle then too? Because I know there's a lot of cool new toys out there in the paranormal investigation
Well,
world, right?
yeah, it's like, so Joshua and I, we have quite a bit of equipment. Yeah, Joshua has the most equipment, and then me second. But we all have a lot of the similar things, like, digital recorders. We all have that. Um,
EMF
Melissa
meters.
has a digital camera that she uses for taking pictures. Joshua and I have the same thermal cameras, and we go around, we take pictures, things like that. But
That
we
I
have a
mean, that
lot
must
of
be kind of
different
useful
pieces.
though to have duplicate
Yeah.
devices like that, because then you can
Yeah,
also compare. So like if you have,
but
two
also,
thermal images, you can compare them to
Yeah.
one
but what's
another.
cool
Well,
is,
what's
sorry,
interesting, sometimes, like, Joshua will pick up something on his thermal camera that I didn't get, or I'll get something that maybe he
right,
didn't have. And
Hmm.
sometimes it depends on where you're taking that picture. And, even if you capture audio evidence of a spirit entity that you think is trying to say, like, a word or sentence or something like that, and you put your headphones on, you're doing playback on your digital recorder, and you hear something, and you're thinking, like, okay, well, that sounds like a man talking, or a child, crying or making some noise, and that kind of thing. Well, one person can have that on the recorder, where the other two people might not even have anything on there. They might not have any of that. So it's, they sometimes they'll pick and choose, like, what devices they want to trigger.
Sure, that's interesting. So I
Yeah.
want to I just want to jump to Melissa for a bit and talk about your role. So do you you're the medium here. Do you have kind of maybe an ability to, when it comes to these things, say there's something that's picked up by a device that isn't picked up by others, like are you able to kind of then maybe fill in some of the gaps, right?
Yes. Well, what's interesting is I found that a lot of times what I will tune into initially when I first go into a location and we'll call a sweep. So that's where I'll walk through each room. I'll see what I'm picking up on. And it's funny how later on our equipment may verify what I'm tuning into. So, for instance, if I walk into a place and I'm feeling a spirit is angry, it doesn't necessarily mean, I hate to throw around the word demonic, that gets thrown around so much, but say this was somebody's home and they still want it to be treated as such, and they aren't exactly happy about us being in there. And I'm seeing that, I'm feeling it, and I'm getting that vibe. It's funny how later on our equipment may pick up on a voice. I mean, we've been cursed out, so
Yes.
sometimes that
Sometimes,
happens.
I
Yeah.
mean, listen, sometimes when you're just chilling in your afterlife vibes and you don't want people bothering you and somebody just does a pop in, I get it. You're not ready for it. You're annoyed.
Yeah, exactly. So that's actually happened. What I've picked up on has been verified by our equipment. And to answer your questions, as far as filling in the blanks, I'll tune into things that maybe our equipment hasn't been picked up on, but it can be verified with the history of the house. So, or whatever the location is, mansion, museum, historical place. And so what's interesting is our roles, our individual roles on the team, and how it all comes together. So, for instance, like Joshua always knows the backstory of these places. I'm to go in there blindly. I'm to know nothing. Um, so it's interesting what I'll tune into, to find out whether or not it can be verified. That's always what I'm trying to figure out. And then our
Well, but
equipment.
that's useful
Yeah.
that you go into it without knowing that, that like Joshua or Rick are doing the sort of research, the backstories, and then, corroborating, I guess you might say, right, the energy or whatever you're receiving, but that you don't know those stories. Like, so it does give an added sort of validation, which is, obviously the challenge in all of anything that's like a paranormal investigation situation is always, validating evidence, right?
Yes, yes, definitely, definitely. So it's interesting how that all comes together and how we all bring something unique to the table in that respect. And I mean, now I've had abilities ever since I was a child, but still, if I tune into something that is truly accurate, it still blows my mind. It's even hard for me to believe. So,
No, that's really fun. And I do want to talk about that with each of you too. And feel free to bounce around how you like to. But so John and I were gonna ask, what was it that started? So like it seems like each of you had experiences early on in life
Yeah.
that drew you into the paranormal investigation world, right? So if you can each
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that for yourself, sort of, where did these things start and sort of spark in your interest?
yes. Who wants to start?
Yeah, let's go ahead and let's have Melissa go ahead and start. You go ahead, tell us, and we'll bounce back. We'll go back around the other way.
Okay. So, as I mentioned, I had experiences ever since I was a very young child. And it goes without saying, they frightened me. And so, I mean, as a child, it's easy for adults to say, well, this is your imagination. What you're experiencing isn't real. And so I basically felt like I had to stifle what I was experiencing as I continued to grow up. So I became the
You have to
teenager.
start like be rationalizing it, and you're not allowed to validate that intuition you're receiving anymore. Yeah, that sort of the human conditioning that starts burying your ability to believe in magical things, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I remember being the teenager who slept with the lights on and just trying to go through life, just trying to, okay, I know this is happening, but I have to pretend it's not happening because I have to fit in the real world and blend in. And I started having these experiences again in my adult life where I could not stifle them, and waking up and seeing spirits in the middle of the night. And the best thing I the best thing that happened was that I chose to embrace these abilities instead of fearing them, and I
Mm-hmm.
started learning about them. Basically, the best way to describe it is the mechanics of mediumship. I mean, these are mediumistic abilities, mediumistic things that are happening. So,
Mm-hmm.
to really learn about how we're receiving this information, that was helpful. Taking classes on remote viewing and other modalities to understand what was going on was also helpful.
Very cool.
And
I definitely want to ask you later more too about the remote viewing, because that does like super fascinate me. I like that's one of the things that I do get really interested in and would love to like train myself to do. I know there's different ways to do it. But
I'd
then
like to
so,
add something in real
yeah, go
quick. Is
ahead.
actually Major Ed Dames actually has a fabulous remote viewing course. He's a former guest of Art Bell's, and I think he's got like classes online you can learn about remote viewing. He teaches all levels. I'll give you the links on
Yeah.
email.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That would be really cool for sure. And then so Rick, you too. So and try to make sure I'm bouncing around to everybody here a little bit.
Yeah.
But so
Well,
what kind of experiences did you have then when you were younger that brought you into this world?
well, it's interesting because the word paranormal, it's really a lot of times people will just think of spirits and paranormal investigations, looking for spirit entities and that kind of thing, but also that also covers the extraterrestrial as well. It's kind of encompasses
Cryptids
all
and
that stuff.
all those different
Yeah.
all those
So
areas
when,
that I
when
love so much.
exactly. So when I was a kid and I was living in Southern California at the time, I was in the car with my mom and her friend, and we're driving. I think it's the 22 freeway that travels on the West Coast. They call it freeway. We're on the East Coast. Everybody calls it highway. So, so for the East Coast people, they're like, "What? What the hell's a freeway?" So anyway, it would run east and west, and all of a sudden, I see this saucer-shaped object. Okay, and it kind of like hovered a little bit over the overpass, and then it took off at an incredible speed, and then it was just gone, right? So,
Did your mom and her friends see this too, or did you just see this?
well, they were so busy looking at each other, talking, that they didn't really see it, right? So I'm
Mm-hmm.
in the back seat. So I'm just like looking up at this thing, but as quickly as I saw it, it wasn't around very long. It was just like a quick glimpse at this thing hovering around. And, you know, I was a pretty young kid, but I was old enough to tell that, it wasn't an airplane, it wasn't a passenger jet,
There was something
it wasn't a
unusual and
helicopter. Yeah. And the
mm-hmm.
fact that it took off. So, like, I mean, there was a time when if you talk to people in school or your friends, your neighbors or whatever about, someday, man is going to land on the moon, they would think that you're off your rocker, that you're nuts, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right. You know, this is really going to happen, right? So look at what has happened with technology and how far we've come. And that was a long time ago that man landed on the moon. But so, I've always had an
Well, we
interest.
do. There is a lot of, disclosure happening with
Yeah,
various different like government agencies and things like that. Obviously, you have to take all of it with a grain of salt, right? A little bit, because
yeah.
how much do you want to trust what you're like? They're always only giving you part of the information, right? You can't trust that it's
That's
always the
right.
whole story.
Well, the thing is, like, I've always, I'm one of those a type of person that I love to research things and I love to investigate and get the facts. I know if I was ever working as a detective for, a law enforcement agency, I think I would be pretty good at it because I'm really detailed about things that I do, very detailed, and I like to have all my ducks in a row and know what the heck I'm doing. But yeah, so when Joshua invited me to come on board, basically I told him, well, I'll try it out and see how I like it. And I really didn't have hardly anything really at that time. I think I brought like a bucket with a couple things, and I really didn't have much other than
Well, you
like
gotta,
my digital recorder and a couple things.
we all
Yeah,
start
so
somewhere, right? And you build up
yeah,
from there.
yeah, you got to start somewhere. So, um, but when that happened, and then I heard that, and then and I see how everything's kind of working together, and some of the equipment Joshua brought and that kind of thing. Then I thought, I really enjoy doing this. This was fun. And then I decided, okay, you know what, I want to give it a shot. Became a member of the team. And, ever since then, I've been very intrigued and I kept buying more and more equipment and more stuff. So, Joshua and I were getting to the point where we would make jokes about like, we have an addiction to not to cigarettes, not to illegal drugs, but paranormal investigation apparatuses.
Right? Like there's plenty of
right?
worse things that you could
Yeah.
be addicted to buying, right?
Exactly. And I'll admit it, I'm the first person to admit it too, but it's like, we're like a couple kids in a candy store because we see all this new technology and all this new equipment, and we want to buy this and buy that, and so
well, and
it's fun.
if when you want to be detailed about trying to collect as much evidence as you can and trying to, again, because it's easy to dismiss a lot of things that happen, right? And sometimes like that's so I mean that's maybe an interesting question for Melissa. This is a thought that I've had about sort of places that are quote unquote haunted, right? Sometimes I wonder if just like the belief that it's haunted, right? That energy that people send to a location and just like the kind of fearful feelings they have or thoughts they have can sometimes cause a manifestation of like what you might consider symptoms of a haunting, right? That would you say you've ever kind of picked up on maybe something like that where I don't know if maybe a tulpa is the right way to say it, sort of like a thought form haunting where it's like everyone puts this belief onto this thing and it sort of causes this area, this space to just have all that energy and generate effects.
I do believe that is absolutely possible. And sometimes I do question if that has happened in certain locations just because I'm all about knowing a true backstory. So when an owner of a mansion, whatever it may be, will say, okay, well, X, Y, and Z has happened here because I have abilities too, and I could feel it, and they're telling this story. My question then is this documented? Did this really happen? And then when the answer is, I don't know, it does make me wonder if this, like you said, has created a manifestation. And then, people believe this, and then they start having experiences based on what they were told. So I do question that myself. Now, that being said, the location that we were just in roughly a week ago, the Samuel Miller Mansion, I started picking up on things. Now this will actually happen. I will start picking up on spirits there, maybe situations that happened prior to me even entering that location. So prior to me entering that mansion, I had said, I'm feeling there's something in the basement. There's a nasty there's a man there. He's very mean. He does not want people down there. He's responsible for something that occurred in that mansion. So and then when we went into the mansion, the owner had said, please don't go down that basement by yourself. There's a gentleman down there. He's responsible for heinous crimes. Supposedly, he murdered women. So it's interesting how that can happen. Now, that being said, I said to her, well, do you have any documentation? Do you know that this really happened? And she's like, well, I'm a medium too, and I'm feeling these things. So it's just interesting how that can happen. This, do you want to call it a coincidence? Like you said, was the story just told many of times based on something that she felt, and I happen to be picking up on it too? So I often wonder these things. Now, that being said, when we went down into that basement and our equipment was picking up on things, confirming what I was feeling and what she was feeling too, and what I was told about this man down there, then I was thinking, okay, well, maybe we do have something solid because our equipment verified that there is someone down there. He, has a very mean demeanor, and he does not like women. He did not like that I was down there. So, yeah, I do agree with you. You wonder if something based on stories that were told, if that was manifested, or did this situation really happen? I do question that myself.
Well, remember too, Melissa, that when we went in that basement, and then the first thing, like when I came in there, and it's like all dirt down there. It's cold
Yeah.
and dreary and dark, right? And it's like all these big masses of dirt that aren't supporting anything, that don't make any sense. And
Mhm.
so I tell Melissa, Melissa, I just got a weird feeling about this big mountain of dirt that was to the right side of me. And I told Melissa, I don't know why, but I feel like there's like a body or something that's buried here. And then what we were doing is, because we do a lot of divination in our investigation, we use dowsing rods. We started off using the copper dowsing rods, but now we have copper dowsing rods that have tubes of light that run on across the top of the copper rods. So it helps to, when you're recording it in video at nighttime, you can go from green to red to blue, whatever color you want to use. And it's much more visual to the audience that's watching that video of us conducting, using the device to pick up spirit activity, with the dowsing rods and that kind of thing. And so what we do is, because you could only ask a yes or no answer, you can't, it's not like a recorder where you could do an EVP session and try to get a word or a sentence. This is more like, how many spirits are in this room, or is there more than 2 or 3 or whatever, or is a female spirit present, things like that. So, and the way we do it is, if the answer is yes, please cross the dowsing rods like an X. So you're crossing those dowsing rods forward like an X. And if the answer is no, then move the dowsing rods towards my shoulder. Well, now, and we've been really pretty lucky, because, the spirits have been really working with us and doing this session. And not only will they cross the rods or move them back for a no, but they'll actually reset the dowsing rods at the starting point. Usually I'll ask them, can you reset the dowsing rods back to the starting point, which is 90 degrees. And sometimes, like, I only have to ask them one time, and now they know how to do it. But we always graciously thank them, to be polite, let them know, thank you for doing that.
That's something that I appreciate, because I always kind of think that when you're watching some of those, and I know, Melissa, on the website you have that you watch a lot of ghost hunting shows too, and sometimes they can be really aggressive, and I think it's a little bit too much when you're kind of shouting at whatever's in here to show themselves, and I'm like, come here, be nice about it.
We picked up
more flies with honey, right?
Yes.
Well, we picked up too, Haleigh, that there was 2 guys that are involved with this kind of thing. So, there was definitely, we picked up for sure that we're getting yes answers or responses to murders that were taking place, the women that were murdered there at that mansion. And it also made, you know, the spirit that we were talking to, spirit or spirits, that did not like women at all. They really had it out for women and wanted to cause them harm and hurt them. And because I flat out asked them, you know, do you want to do any harm to Joshua and myself? We definitely got a strong no answer to that. But Melissa, on the other hand, we're getting a yes answer that it would want to hurt Melissa, and the dowsing rod was pointing right at her. It knew, like, it's amazing because you'll say, you know, well, show me where Melissa is in the room. The dowsing rod, well, I'm not touching it, I'm not moving it, right? And the dowsing rod, it's just swinging right over towards Melissa. So we were definitely, and we were asking about, there's a lot of mountains of dirt. And then I thought to myself, this doesn't make sense, man. Why do you have all these mountains of dirt? Like, for what possible reason would you have these mountains of dirt? Because they're not supporting anything. So the only thing that I could come up with was that these women were murdered because this guy clearly didn't like women, and all this dirt was shoveled into a mountain to cover it up because they did, you know, I'm guessing maybe they didn't want to dig a hole and then cover it up and flatten it out. So what they did is they just piled a big mountain of dirt and kept covering it up and figured, well, it's in the basement, who's going to come down here?
Yeah.
But we came up with that there were several bodies down there in that basement, buried under those mountains of dirt. And it's really, really a creepy thing, you know? So, and the lady that owns the property thinks that maybe it could have been a brothel at one time.
And also I wanted to say, I wanted to add a couple of things in. Rick was saying, I did my own sessions, basically. We sometimes split up and do investigate on our own. I actually went up to the attic area and started doing thermal pictures after the news station left that came, because we had CBS 21 there that day. And I actually, on one of the images, I actually went and captured this shadow of this man and this woman. And Melissa can also verify it. And I also took it to numerous top experts in the paranormal field, from Dave Giuliano to Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, to people who have done investigating for Alexandria Holzer, who's Hans's daughter. They all said the same thing, that you got something ghostly because it wasn't a heat signature. It wasn't someone living. It was someone, it wasn't orange or red or anything in the color spectrum. It was completely a cold signature. And I took it to numerous people and had it enhanced by Amy. And she said the same thing, that the apparition of the male in the thermal image matches someone who hung himself up in the late 1800s, early 1900s, up in the attic in the mansion. And Amy verified that for me. It looked like someone named George.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and so Josh, I did want to ask you too, because just to kind of circle back around a bit, I know that you kind of have on the website too that you had early life experiences and paranormal experiences also, yes. Right? Like, so other besides the, you know, early interest in the unsolved mysteries, that you also had personal experiences.
Yes, I did have quite a few personal. The first thing is something really cool. This actually belonged to a guy who actually grew up with paranormal experiences. This is the tri-field EMF meter that belonged to Ryan Buell from Paranormal State. This is that he used on over 2 or 300 cases. This is the Paranormal State EMF meter that Ryan Buell used. Very cool. Celebrity ghost hunter, world renowned. So yes, I had many experiences as a kid. I remember being at recess, especially watching, you know, basically seeing like lights in the sky. I always looked up to see if there was UFOs. I was always fascinated with that. And what really gained my interest was watching an NBC program called The Other Side with Linda Moulton Howe. Linda has been a longtime friend of mine. She's the world's top expert on crop circles, cattle mutilations, and all that. And of course, listening to Art Bell in the 90s, I used to call in the Art Bell show as a kid as much as I could and ask him questions. And I remember very well him describing, you know, someone that called in 1997 talking about being over Area 51 and Los Alamos and all that. And, you know, like seeing like giant robots and all kinds of different things. That was a pretty amazing call back then. And I remember talking to Art about this, and he used to say that he had all kinds of experiences while, you know, being out in different parts of the world, like being on a station out in Okinawa, seeing UFOs. So I always saw like triangular lights in the sky. And then when I had my own personal experience when I was an 18-year-old kid at the General Wayne Inn, feeling like the presence of a Hessian soldier and feeling like, being touched there, that changed my life. And that made my decision that I'm going to go in later on in life. And that's what I did, and helping people and helping client owners. So it really helped shape who I became later on, like through seeing UFOs, through seeing like, Hessian soldiers as a kid, and, all that. So it really helped shape who I am today.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so John and I were talking about this too. So we wanted to ask, how do you all go about selecting a location that you would investigate, or how do clients find you if you have folks who are looking for you?
So I'll like to answer this question, because I created a protocol that basically, because we have so many cases, we got so many locations of places. So what I did a couple months ago was I established a new protocol. So now people that want to request help, they have to go through the website. So we now have our webmasters are very talented. We have our own team of talented designers. They have to go through the website, click the request help tab. So that goes to our sister website, which is Dark Matter News. And of course, Dark Matter News has ties to Art Bell's Midnight in the Desert. So now they go through the Dark Matter News website, they fill out the form, and it goes to Melissa. And then Melissa will pick it up and say, hey, I got this email from client XYZ. They reported having a ghost in their attic, for example, and they need help. And then Melissa will share it to myself and Rick on text message, and then we'll discuss the case. And then what we'll do is Melissa will reply back and confirm that, hey, Rick will call you, and please give me your number. So Rick will do the interview with the client, and then like we'll set up the investigation, and then like afterwards we'll do write them a report or a lecture. So we have a very streamlined process, but it really helps because it helps us weed out cases that are not serious and also cases that are very serious. So creating a protocol, a case management system, makes it a lot easier to keep track of everything.
I was gonna ask, like with trying to find like locations and stuff for investigations, how much time, like realistically, how much time do you give? Like, do you give something 4 hours? Do you give something all night before you kind of have to just call it quits? Like, is it not going to happen tonight?
Usually, like we try to instead of being like a team that investigates during the day, our night. Usually, some people will be down from lockdown from like 7 to 7. We like to usually do it early in the day. Like sometimes we'll go at like 3 o'clock and go to like 10 or 11, because we want to be respectful of the client or the homeowner, because it's their house. We don't want to keep them up until like 3 or 4 in the morning or 2 in the morning. So we want to try to let them, keep them back control of their house. So usually we'll set up around 2 or 3 and then go to like 8 or 9, because sometimes some of the places we have to go are pretty far. Sometimes some of the places that we've been down towards the beach in Delaware were 2-hour drive plus. So usually we're trying to pack up early, break down, get on the road. But the one thing is I'm always phenomenal at. I'm always really good at finding locations. Like, I have a database of over thousands of cases. I got a list from Jeff Bellinger from Ghost Adventures. He's been a longtime friend, and he sent me a list of like haunted locations to check out. And of course, Dave Giuliano, who runs the Ghost Hunter store, sent me a website called the Shadowlands.net, which has a huge database full of haunted locations. So we're always looking for amazing locations. And every case that we've gotten numerous pieces of evidence, and we're very good. We treat the spirits like it's their home. We say, thank you for allowing us to come in your home. Thank you for, thank you for setting off that piece of equipment. When you say please and thank you, you're going to get great results. Right, Rick?
That's right. The other thing too is like, what amazes me is that, every investigation, there's similarities, okay, between different places. But what's different is there's a lot of different factors, because you come in one investigation, let's say, and as a rule of thumb, the bigger the venue, the more bedrooms, the more floors, you have to climb up and down the stairs. That all takes a little bit of time. Somebody has a single story house and it's only 4 bedrooms, you're going to be able to, it's going to be a shorter investigation. If it's a 3-story house or a mansion and there's, 10 to 15 bedrooms, that's going to take a lot of time, So we always try to find out too in the interview, like, what places have been reported as the most haunted places. So when we kind of come in, we come into the place, we already have some knowledge of, well, the basement has been the most reported area, that and the master bedroom or the child's room or in the kitchen and that kind of thing. So we kind of know based on the information given to us, okay, well, this is where we're going to set up the cameras because these are supposedly the hotter spots.
Mm-hmm.
So, we use that knowledge that's given to us to set things up. And, you could have an investigation that takes 4 hours. You could have one that's going to take almost 8 hours to do. So it really just kind of depends. But what's interesting is that not every single piece of equipment will be triggered. Sometimes some pieces of equipment, you might go to 2 or 3 investigations and you keep bringing it and it never gets triggered. And all of a sudden you go to one place and then that same device gets triggered more than any other device.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to say because it's not up to us. It's up to the spirit world. They decide when
set it
and
up in
where
the
they
active
want
areas.
to.
We just set it up in the active areas, and that's the best. And the beautiful thing I love is using the Ovilus, which actually I've been using that for a while. And the Ovilus is great when you have a psychic medium like Melissa who can come in and do her readings. And then what we do is we'll take the Ovilus words from the dictionary mode, which uses the EMF fields, and then we'll compare it to Melissa's readings. And if there's any kind of correlation between them, you have some kind of paranormal activity, which is really great about using a word bank thing because you can pick up on things like that Melissa might not be able to, or she might pick up on that the Ovilus might not be able to.
Well, I actually think the word banks work better if you have a psychic medium there, because, for example, let's say there's a particular name that pops up. Okay. Mm-hmm. And Melissa picked up that name earlier during the evening.
Yeah.
So James comes up and she goes, earlier she mentioned about she was picking up a James or whatever, right. That's when it becomes really helpful, because the thing with word banks, they're kind of controversial because
well, so I don't
sometimes
know if
they'll just pick out words that don't make any sense, what
right.
I mean?
Well, so it's still interesting though when you can get things to line up with what pops up on an Ovilus and what you pick up on. And I don't know if you guys have ever tried, so I'm a big fan of Haleigh. I don't know if you've seen the Haleigh documentary series where they do the Estes method.
Is that with who? I do
Carl Pfeiffer is on there, and Greg
Newkirk.
Greg and Dana Newkirk. Yes.
I've known them for years.
That's really cool.
Dana actually wrote our first Summerwind article when Craig and I were starting the Summerwind Society. She wrote our first restoration article in 2014.
That's amazing. That's really cool. So so you're familiar then with the Estes method, and I know that Ryan and Shane from Ghost Files.
It's funny you mentioned the Estes method because Joshua and myself, we have what's called the Chairs Warner method, taken from Joshua's last name, Joshua Chairs. So Chairs, and then my last name is Warner, so the Chairs Warner method. We have it's think of the Estes method on steroids. So we started out with the Estes method, but we have what we feel is much better than the Estes method. Because number one, we're using a psychic medium like Melissa, who has done very well with our method. And how it's different is the similarities between our method and the Estes method. They both have, the AM/FM,
the spirit
radio,
box, right,
if you will, that runs forward and back at different speeds. Mm-hmm. And you put, do I want it on AM or FM? They have headphones on and they have a blindfold. Okay, that's pretty standard. So what we've added to that is we will turn on our digital recorders, and we want to pick up the question answer session because we're asking questions from the spirit world. And we asked Melissa, if you hear a word or a sentence, please say what you're hearing, maybe on the AM/FM. But let's take it a step farther than that. Not just what you're hearing on the radio. What are you feeling around you? So if you see or feel a spirit around you, or you feel that they're directly trying to contact you, talk about that as well. So we'll ask questions, and be like, well, how many spirits are here? And she'll say like 10 or something like that. So we know it's not really like an accidental thing, but she also uses the power of crystals too to help enhance the session. And we also use the Delco glasses, which are these orange colored lights that you look into. They kind
Yeah.
of disorient you a little bit.
Right.
And
Kind of
then
like a
sometimes,
sensory deprivation sort of
Yes.
situation.
yeah, exactly. And then she'll look into a scrying mirror too. That's another way we do it. But she can't see us. She cannot hear any questions we're asking because we make sure the volume's loud enough.
Right,
But we're
but
also running
that's
the
always
EMF
really
meter, too.
interesting though, right? If you can get things to, again, sort of match up so that you're having a back and forth conversation. And that is really interesting, right? When those things happen. So I do want to also ask you guys, and I'm trying to watch and be mindful of your time too here, but I did want to ask each of you, what are some of like your favorite, like if you could pick like a favorite or two locations for each of you that you can tell us were your favorite locations that you investigated and why?
Melissa?
There's so many. That's
Try
a tough one.
to pick one or two. Like the
So-
first ones that come to your mind that were like the most fun.
I had to really think about that because each investigation has been interesting. They all have their own unique experiences and the evidence that we've captured. But so I believe it was last year we investigated. It's called the Lightship Overfalls in Lewis, Delaware. So that's Lower Delaware, 2 hours away from us. And it's a lightship. So you think of a lighthouse on a boat, a floating lightship. Very interesting place. It had a wonderful vibe about it. I didn't sense anything negative. And what was interesting was the organizer, the curator, I guess that's what his title is. He was very skeptical. He did not believe that there was any paranormal activity. He would hear about it. It was rumored to be haunted, but I don't really think that he truly believed, from what I understand. And we had such a great investigation. Our equipment was going off almost on command. And later on, we captured a Class A EVP. So what that is when you can hear something clearly, there is no mistaking what is being said. You can hear the tone of the voice, you can hear the dialect. Because a lot of times during investigations, you'll capture an EVP and it sounds like a whisper. And if you let 5 people hear it, you'll get 5 different answers. But this one in particular was clear as day. We asked a question, and later on, when we listened to our recorder, we heard a woman say, "Hello, help me," almost like she was singing, like she was obviously asking for help. But
That
her
was a real clear one too. Very clear.
Yes. So to get that was absolutely mind blowing, to the point where the local paper talked about it, and the local Delmar, that's news, did a story about it, did a story about our investigation.
Very cool.
Yes, that was absolutely mind blowing. And another memorable one was my very first one when I joined the team at the Selma Mansion, because I never did a paranormal investigation before with a team. I've gone on group investigations, with other paranormal teams that would open them to the public, but to go on by, with our team, the few of us, and see what I was tuning into and, learning about the backstory was fascinating. And I just remember going into the Selma Mansion for the first time, walking in there and feeling this tidal wave of energy. I felt there were so many spirits in there, and I remember having to shut the door and walk away and catch my breath and regroup.
Wow.
Yeah, and also knowing that what I was tuning into at that location was accurate. And because I remember saying to Joshua, it was like a few weeks before we were scheduled to go, I said, Joshua, I said, I'm seeing a man. I'm tuning into a man, and he looks like Abraham Lincoln. And I said, I'm sure a lot of men had that look about them in those times, because I'm assuming, it was 1800s. And he says, no, you're right. I said, no. I said, well, I can't be right. I said, visions of Abraham Lincoln. He says, no, you're correct. I said, well, how? And he says, well, Mary Todd Lincoln, his wife, that was his grandfather's mansion. Well, my jaw hit the ground.
Oh,
I
very interesting.
My mind was blown. So, again, we've been on so many investigations, but they are some of the memorable ones that have stood out.
I love it.
Yeah.
You know, another thing about that ship, and I know Melissa remembers this, but so I brought a REM pod device, which stands for radiating electromagneticity. And what it is, it uses an antenna, telescopic antenna, and there's like an electrical charge that's around there. When that field is broken, it'll set off the device to where it'll start beeping or playing music, whatever, however they had it set for what kind of audio device they have in there. So anyway, so I bought on Etsy, there was this, it's a replica of not the Annabelle doll from like, the ones with the Warrens and all that.
Right.
And not the real Annabelle doll that was like, it was really the Raggedy Ann doll. It's not that one. It's from the movie Annabelle, right?
Okay.
So it's this doll that comes with interchangeable heads, and they're all scary looking heads. And you can pull the head off the neck. I go, this is creepy. And change it to put another creepy head on, right? And then you turn it on, pull the antenna on, and as soon as you test it out, you cross your hand over it and it starts going off. So the only way that could be set off is if we put our hands around the antenna or touch it, and that'll set it off, right? But if it's not over any electrical devices, was in a workshop where it was set up on a table, but there was no electrical power that was working there, right? So we set it up there, and the thing was going off like crazy all night long. That thing was beeping, going off, and we got a lot of activity. And it's like the doll sits in a chair that's in this little, it's like a replica of the curio cabinet that the real Annabelle dolls in, the Raggedy Ann one.
Oh, okay, very cool.
And yeah, and it, and it's like, it just sits there, and you wait for the action to happen, right? And this thing was just going off like crazy.
But that's part of the paranormal investigation thing too, is sometimes you have to just kind of, it's a lot of a waiting game, just waiting for something to happen or
you never know. That's why we have a big variety of stuff, because we don't know from 1 minute to the next what it's gonna set off. Another investigation we're in a child's room, and I remember that was a lot of fun. We got real high activity. It was Melissa and I were in this kid's room.
Was that more of a fun energy then? Like,
well, yeah, it was like
more
it was
playful?
a child's room, and so Melissa was picking up that there was a child spirit in the room, and we had these little, you press the button on these little balls and they start blinking colored light. They were going off like crazy, and I had a K2 EMF meter that was going nuts, and it was just amazing, like all this activity of everything going off. It was a real hot spot in that room, so
well, that's
you love
fun
it when you get that.
when you get that playful energy, and you can really get the equipment going off. That's a lot of fun. And then Joshua, how about you? Do you have a favorite?
I'm gonna say for me, like, there's been so many like investigations that we've done, and it's funny you mentioned the Selma Mansion, because right before I asked Melissa to join, Leo Ashcraft reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in purchasing Dark Matter News from me? I used this on Art Bell's Midnight in the Desert. It was a news service that was going out to over like 200 or 300 radio stations all over the world. So Leo decided to part with it. So we bought the Dark Matter News name, the logos, the audio files, and the website, all the rights to the brand. And we basically just rebranded it, and we kind of keep the website alive as a tribute memory to Art, because Art passed in 2018. So we just keep it alive as a tribute site, all things paranormal news. So for me, I'm going to say the most defining investigations that we have done. We've done 21 so far, and it's probably going to be like 30, 50 more, and 80 more in the future. But for me, the one that really defines me as an investigator is probably going to be the Governor Ross Mansion in Seaford, Delaware. This is an old governor's residence that we did in March and May of 2023, and we did the interior portion first, and we did the exterior portion, and there. We had TV Delmarva's Hunter Alton come down with us, who's a meteorologist there. And I asked him, hey, would you be interested in coming along? And the minute that we got there, we felt that energy was just absolutely just sucked us right in. I mean, Melissa was picking up on things. Hunter was picking up on things. And mind you, like I got a thermal image in the one of the girls' bedrooms. And of course, Rick got those two images that look like bank robbers, right, Rick?
Yeah, like one guy looked like, some bank robber, the guy that takes the nylon stocking, he pulls it over his face and smashes his nose down.
On
It looked like
thermal
that kind of thing.
Thermal
Camera. Yeah, it was the thermal camera we used. And and one guy had a beard, and I don't think there was anybody there that even had a beard. And we know better than we don't aim our thermal cameras at a person, because that's going to screw everything up and give you a false positive, and you think, oh, look at that, there's a person there.
And it's funny because the minute that Melissa was also picking up on someone named Mary that same night when we did the Chairs Warner method in one of the rooms, and what was amazing is the board president of the Governor Ross Mansion, she was there the first time with us, and she wasn't a believer at all in the paranormal, but after she saw our investigation, she became a believer. Like she never, she came out to our last lecture and she mentioned that, like in the news, we made the news again on Bay to Bay News in October, about like that investigation. Like she didn't believe, and all of a sudden, boom, she did. And then we did the exterior portion. We had all kinds of crazy things happen. We did the slaves' quarters, which is like this place where slaves on the plantation would have stayed in the 1850s. And there we started, the pendulum started going up like crazy. The dowsing rods were going crazy. And Noel and Hunter were also picking up on things. And basically, and Melissa and Noel were able to spill out two slaves that actually were actually known to stay there that were based on the historical records. And that was pretty wild. And so
remember that cat? We got this cat too, that it's got a necklace around it, right? That's a paranormal device. And then you can hear the cat, like it's a cute little thing, right? But like a stuffed animal, but it's turned into a paranormal device with an antenna too. But this thing, it was just going off. The lights kept turning on. It was beeping, all this noise.
Yep.
So we got a lot of activity with that.
And I'd say one more for me after that investigation is probably the Bucksville house. There's this place in Kintersville, Pennsylvania, with these really sweet couple that been there. It's been actually featured on America's Most Haunted Inns. We did that in July of last year, and we're going to be going back there in April sometime to do a paid lecture, which is going to be awesome.
Very cool.
I remember doing that investigation, and Melissa was doing her dice, and she actually spelled out the word Nicholas, like as a Nicholas Buck. That was pretty amazing, right, Melissa? Do you remember doing that?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's something that I use called spirit dice, and it's dice with letters, and I tune into it. Grab a handful, and I have they're in a bag, and I lay them out, and using what I have, I see if they will spell out a word, and I see if that word has anything to do with the history of the home. So it's interesting how that will happen too. And I love all the different things that we use. Divination like that, using the dice, like Rick said, he'll use a pendulum, all the different things it's really, really cool. It's more than just REM pods and thermal cameras. To add a bunch of different things. And what I love that our team does
the technology and the intuitive elements, right? Have them both working together.
And what's cool is like not only like with the Bucksville house, like with Barb being there, she showed us a lot of evidence before we even did after the investigation. She showed us like light patterns that were up in attics. She also showed us this chest that actually Chip Coffey had used on the show The Psychic Kids. Supposedly had a lot of energy with it. And when Rick actually did the dowsing rods, crossing in front of that chest. We were actually goofing off. Rick was goofing off right in front of the dowsing rod, just being funny like his normal self. We see this huge shadow right near the entrance where the 1795 room, completely like a shadow head go by. We were goofing off, and Rick probably remembers that being in front of that chest very well, don't you, Rick?
Oh yeah, I remember that. And then wasn't that the same place where we got real high
thermal
heat reading on the stairs, right? Was that the same
Yep.
place?
Yep.
Yeah, and it was at the bottom of the stairs because some paranormal investigators have been reported before that spirit was sitting at the stairs at the bottom area, and you could see, you put the thermal camera there and it was like red hot. We were getting all this spot. But we had another place too that we did. Was that the Cossey Mansion?
Cossey, yeah. Down in Milford.
Yeah, that's where it has the barber shop, right? The one with the barber shop?
Oh, that was Sunnybray.
Oh, yeah. Sunnybray. Okay. So the Sunnybray was really cool because there was a lot of rooms there, but normally, we don't usually pick up stuff inside the bathrooms, but there's plenty of bathrooms here, and there's only one bathroom that really, I think Joshua used. I don't know if Melissa did or what, but there was no other bathrooms being used, and so except that one. And some of the thermal imaging I was doing in the bathrooms, you could see the knobs were in the red. Okay, it was showing a red heat signature.
As if someone had just touched it?
It was showing hot, right? Okay, yeah, like somebody just touched it. Now, if we just walk in the bathroom and put our hand on something and then take it, let's say on the knob, and then take a thermal image, it's gonna show in the red because it's picking up the residual heat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, but that wasn't the case here. No one used that bathroom. And the knobs were red. There was a red band on the outside of the sink, almost like when you turn on the knob and your body's leaning against the sink. Mm-hmm. We had that. There was like a red thermal around the toilet, which there was no heat in that room at all. But there, in toilet, porcelain, it's usually cold, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we got this reading there. We also got in the barber shop downstairs, because they had a barber shop there, and we were getting at the front of the bar, we were getting hot thermal readings, and also on the bottles, like there all the tops of the bottles. It's almost like there were whiskey bottles that you grab the neck of them.
Oh, sure. And so,
right? And we didn't touch any
grabbing
of those. Joshua didn't touch them. I didn't touch them. It was only us down there. And all of a sudden, in a thermal imaging, you could see all these red spots, hot spots, on the necks of the bottle. And if it can't be explained by anything human, then what are you left with? It's got to be paranormal.
It's something weird.
That you would think, are cold. Handles, faucets, bottles that nobody handled, and they're showing up hot. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
I love it. That's so interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, I got one more question for you guys. Sure. Let's say money is an issue anywhere in the world. What is your number one bucket list investigation location?
I would say for me, like Ryan Buell's been here, and I've heard all about it because I just reached out to him. Is West Virginia Penitentiary. Supposedly, basically, it's one of the most haunted places in America. And I know Ryan and Heather and Katrina have all been there, and they told me to look into it. So I've been a good friend of Heather and Katrina's for a number of years now. I've see them all the time at the Paracons. My best friend Gwen went to school with Katrina, so I'm very close to both Heather Taddy and Katrina Weidman. The Travel the Dead are world-renowned paranormal investigators. So what probably I would say Trans-Allegheny, and of course West Virginia. And how about you guys? Any dream places that you guys want to go to?
You know what really stuck out of my head was this. I think they call it the Island of the Dolls because
down in Mexico.
Is that where it's at? Yeah, and they go on this island thing, right?
Or like like Southern California, Mexico, like right across the border.
Yeah, and they go inside this, looks like an old shack, and there's all these dolls hanging there. And it's really creepy.
The guy had such a weird fascination with collecting dolls, and had I know I'm familiar with the story where like he supposedly like had found a girl who had drowned and like became obsessed with collecting dolls. And yeah,
That's
no,
like
that
where all
was,
the dolls are hanging off the ceiling, right?
yeah,
They're
they're
like
just
all
like,
over the place.
they're
Yeah.
everywhere. Yeah, it's very
Yeah, and they were
bizarre.
getting a lot of paranormal activity inside that thing.
Mhm.
That to
And I'm
me, I
also
mean,
going to
'cause it's
say,
so creepy. I mean, that would be
and I'm,
fun.
and I'm also going to say that the Winchester House too is one of our bucket list
Oh,
locations
yes. I would
because
love
it's
to go see the Winchester Mystery House, 100%.
supposed to be like in order to Pisa, Sarah Winchester built this house with all these different spirits that were killed by the Winchester repeating rifle, and she built like this mansion like that was just ongoing until she died in 1920. And so it's an amazing location. Myrtle's Plantation. I mean, there's so many.
Yeah.
You can just it's endless.
Melissa,
Yes.
how about you? What would your big bucket list spot be?
So it's so funny because I have two, and I was going to mention the Winchester House. Yes, because of the paranormal activity, I would love to investigate, but also the way it is designed fascinates me. So I would love to
am
check it
with
out.
you on that 100%. Just to see the weirdness of the architecture, I would love it.
Yes, definitely. And also is it called the Scylla Axe Murder House?
Velisca, Max Action Murder House.
Velisca. It's
Oh,
close.
is that the one?
Out in
Is that
Iowa.
in Massachusetts? That the
Iowa.
lady that hacked the
Oh,
parents
this-
with an axe?
Oh,
Lizzie
No,
Borden.
that's the
Lizzie
Lizzie
Borden.
Borden house. Yeah.
Is that the one you're talking about?
No,
No.
Velisca's different.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Velisca. That's Velisca. What is it? Iowa?
Axe
Yes.
Murder Mouse in Velisca,
Okay.
Iowa.
Yes. Yes, definitely. That's where the killer snuck in and murdered an entire family, plus the children's friends that were spending the night. So I've seen that story over and over again, featured on many paranormal shows, and the house just fascinates me. It amazes me whether even if it's just residual energy hanging around there. I think what fascinates me is when something horrible, something horrific happens at a location, and how that energy is basically embedded at that location. So it's a home that both fascinates me and scares me at the same time. And because I've seen it featured over and over again, I feel like I know the layout of that house. I feel like I could walk in and know where everything is. But just that little house, I hate to call it the house of horrors, but unfortunately, I mean, horrific things happen there, as we know. And the backstory, it was a quiet little town, and that just, I mean, shook the town. So just the backstory of that home, and the fact that I've seen it featured so many times, I would love, love, love to go and check it out.
Well, let's put it out into the universe that y'all get to investigate all of your favorite locations, that because you have so many more investigations ahead of you, I am sure. So I thank you so much for joining us. Do tell us, each of you, where everybody can find you. We'll put all the links in the description as well, but let everybody know where they can find Phantom Detectives and each of you and the things you're working on.
Sure. So I'd like to give my two websites because they're kind of like the central hub for like everything. That I'll just give like the team website because it just makes it so much easier to find all of our other websites.
Yes.
That's all one word, phantomdetectives.org. So when you go to phantomdetectives.org, you can scroll down where it says important websites in the middle. You'll see Melissa's website, Rick's website, and you'll also see, I'd like to talk just about this for a second. We're also listed on a website called paranormalsocieties.org. Paranormalsocieties.org is the follow-up to Bill Wilkins' paranormalsocieties.com. Bill was a programmer who developed a website that had over 5,000 paranormal teams from around the world, but unfortunately he left it abandoned in June 2020. So paranormalsocieties.org is for teams that could list their services. His friend Josh took over the new website and programmed it and improved it. So, phantomdetectives.org has a dark matter news website, Rick's ERC website, and also Melissa's website.
Yes,
Awesome.
sir. It's all there.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, all of you, Rick and Joshua and Melissa, for joining us from Phantom Detectives. We have had such a fun time learning more about you. I would love to have y'all back again to talk more about your investigations.
Yeah, it was awesome meeting you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us. Yes, it was great to meet you.
Yep,
thank
have
you
a great
so
night.
much. You have a great night also. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye.
Bye.
Hi again, friends. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the No Small Stories podcast. Do check out the links below in the description so you can find more information on this episode's guest. And if you'd like to support more episodes of the No Small Stories podcast, you can become a patron. Find us on patreon.com/No Small Stories. Do also follow us on Instagram at No Small Stories Podcast. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a review, do all those wonderful things that you awesome listeners can do. Until next time, friends, remember, no matter how small you start, your story is always a big deal to us. Special thanks to the Parapost Network for the support of their community. Check out all the great podcasts on the Parapost Network on Facebook.